UFC 100, a defining moment in MMA history. The UFC 100 is often highlighted as one of the most significant events in the history of mixed martial arts. Held on July 11, 2009, at the Mandalay Bay Events Center in Las Vegas, Nevada. This event marked a pivotal moment for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. The promotion had grown immensely since its inception, and UFC 100 symbolized its arrival on the global stage as premier sport organization. The cards was staked with high-profile fights, featuring some of the biggest names in the sport, including Brock Lesnar, George St. Pierre, and Dan Henderson. The event was a monumental success, breaking records and setting new standards for MMA events. The main event, Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir. The main event of UFC 100 was a heavyweight title unification bout between Brock Lesnar and Frank Mir. This was a rematch from their previous encounter at UFC 81, where Mir handed Lesnar a submission loss in his UFC debut. Lesnar, a former WWE superstar, had since captured the UFC heavyweight title and was looking to avenge his loss to Mir. From the start of the fight, Lesnar imposed his will with his superior wrestling and strength. He took Mir down repeatedly and landed heavy ground and pound striker. Mir tried to find openings for submission, but Lesnar's power and control were overwhelming. In the second round, Lesnar unleashed a barrage of punish and forced the referee to stop the fight, giving Lesnar a TKO victory and solidifying his position as the undisputed heavyweight champion. Co-main event, George St. Pierre versus Thiago Alves. The co-main event featured George St. Pierre defending his welterweight title against the powerful striker Thiago Alves. George St. Pierre, known for his well-rounded skills and strategic approaches, faced a tough challenge in Alves, who was on a 7-fight winning streak and had earned a reputation for his knockout power. George St. Pierre executed a masterful game plan, utilizing his superior wrestling and grappling to neutralize Alves' striking. Throughout the 5-round fight, St. Pierre took Alves down multiple times and controlled the pace with his ground and pound and submission attempts. Despite Alves' resilience, St. Pierre's dominance was clear and he won a unanimous decision, retaining his welterweight title and further cementing his legacy as one of the greatest fighters in UFC history. Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping. Another highly anticipated fight at UFC 100 was the middleweight clash between Dan Henderson and Michael Bisping. The two fighters were opposing coach on the ninth season of The Ultimate Fighter, and their rivalry and intensified leading up to the fight. Henderson, a former Pride champion, known for his knockout power, faced the brash and confident Bisping. The fight culminated in one of the most memorable knockouts in UFC history. In the second round, Henderson landed a devastating overhand right that knocked Bisping out cold. The knockout was so emphatic that it became one of the defending moments of UFC 100 and is still remembered as one of the greatest knockouts in the sport history. Notable fights and performance. UFC 100 featured several other notable fights and performances that contributed to the event's legendary status. John Fitch vs. Paulo Thiago. John Fitch, a top welterweight contender, faced Paulo Thiago in a bout that showcased Fitch's relentless grappling and control. Fitch secured a unanimous decision victory, demonstrating his ability to dominate opponents on the ground. Yoshiro Kiyama vs. Alan Belcher. In existing middleweight bout, Japanese superstar Yoshiro Akiyama made his UFC debut against Alan Belcher. The fight was a competitive and thrilling, with both fighters displaying impressive striking and grappling skills. Akiyama earned a split decision victory in what was argued the fight of the night. Mark Coleman vs. Stefan Bonnar. UFC Hall of Famer Mark Coleman faced the Ultimate Fighter Season 1 finalist Stefan Bonnar in a light heavyweight bout. Coleman, known as the godfather of ground and pound, used his wrestling to control Bonnar and earn a unanimous decision victory. The impact to UFC 100. UFC 100 was a landmark event that set new records for the promotion. It drew over 1 million pay-per-views, making it of the highest grossing events in UFC history at the time. The event also generated significant media coverage and brought mainstream attention to MMA, showcasing the sport's growing popularity and acceptance. The success of UFC 100 demonstrated the UFC ability to deliver high-quality events that captivated audience worldwide. It solidified the promotion reputation as the premier organization in MMA and paved the way for future landmark events. UFC 100 also highlighted the depth of talent in the UFC, with multiple champions and top contenders delivering standout performance. Legacy. The legacy of UFC 100 is defined by its historic significance and the memorable moments it produced. Brock Lesnar dominant victory over Frank Mir showcased the legacy of UFC 100 is defined by its historic significance and the memorable moments it produced. Brock Lesnar dominant victory over Frank Mir showcases his evolution as the fighter and solidifies his status as the top heavyweight. George St. Pierre masterful performance against Thiago Alves reinforced his legacy as one of the greatest welterweights of all times. Dan Henderson knockout of Michael Bisping remains one of the most iconic moments in UFC history. UFC 100 is remembered as a milestone event that elevated the sport of MMA to a new height. It demonstrated the UFC's ability to overcome change and deliver an unforgettable night of fight. The event's success paved the way for future landmark events and continued the UFC growth and global sport organization. Question and answer. What made UFC 100 a landmark event in MMA history? UFC 100 was a landmark event in MMA history due to its high-profile fights, significant milestone, and record-breaking success. The event featured some of the biggest names in the sport, including Brock Lesnar, George St. Pierre, and Dan Henderson. It drew over 1 million pay-per-views buys, making it one of the highest-grossing events in UFC history at the time. The event's success demonstrated the UFC ability to deliver fight-quality events that captivate audience worldwide and solidified its reputation as the premier organization in MMA. How did Brock Lesnar avenge his loss to Frank Mir at UFC 100? Brock Lesnar avenged his loss to Frank Mir at UFC 100 by dominating the fight with his superior wrestling and ground and pound. From the start of the fight, Lesnar took Mir down repeatedly and landed heavy strikes. In the second round, Lesnar unleashed a barrage of punch that forced the referee to stop the fight, giving Lesnar a TKO victory and solidifying his position as the undisputed heavyweight champion. 3. What strategy did George St. Pierre use to defeat Thiago Alves at UFC 100? George St. Pierre used his superior wrestling and grappling to defeat Thiago Alves at UFC 100. St. Pierre took Alves down multiple times throughout the 5-round fight and controlled the pace with his ground and pound and submission attempts. Despite Alves' resilience, St. Pierre's dominance was clear, and he won unanimous decision, retaining his welterweight title and further cementing his legacy as one of the greatest fighters in UFC history. 4. Why is Dan Henderson knockout of Michael Bisping at UFC 100 so memorable? Dan Henderson knockout of Michael Bisping at UFC 100 is memorable due to its emphatic and decisive nature. In the second round, Henderson landed a devastating overhead right that knocked Bisping out cold. The knockout was so powerful that it became one of the defining moments of UFC 100, and I still remember it as one of the greatest knockouts in the sport history. The rivalry between Henderson and Bisping, stemming for their time as opposing coach on The Ultimate Fighter, added to the significance of the knockout. What impact did UFC 100 have to the UFC and the sport of MMA? UFC 100 had a significant impact on the UFC and the sport of MMA by setting new records and bringing mainstream attention to the sport. The event drew over 1 million pay-per-view buys and generated significant media coverage. It showcased the depth of talent in the UFC and solidified the promotion reputation as the premier organization in MMA. UFC 100 also highlighted the sport's growing popularity and acceptance, paving the way for future landmark events and contribute to the UFC growth as a global sport organization.